May 27th, 1942. A wrecked 20,000-ton aircraft carrier limps into Pearl Harbor. The professional estimate, 90 days to repair. The Admiral's order, you have 72 hours. The fate of the Pacific hinged on an impossible 3-day miracle. This is the story of the USS Yorktown. May 8th, 1942. The Coral Sea. The world is a symphony of violence. Aboard the aircraft carrier USS Yorktown, CV-5, the air itself screams. The high, thin shriek of diving Japanese D-3 Naval bombers tears through the guttural thump-thump-thump of the ship's own 5-inch anti-aircraft guns. Smoke stings the eyes, acrid and oily, mixing with the sharp salt spray of the South Pacific. On the bridge, Captain Elliot Buckmaster watches his ship, a 20,000-ton behemoth, twist and shudder through the water. Hard right rudder, he barks, trying to comb the torpedoes he knows are in the water, trying to throw off the aim of the pilots plunging from the sky. Below him, 800 feet of American steel trembles. For the men on the open-air gun mounts, the sky is a blizzard of black puffs of flak and deadly graceful enemy aircraft. They see the meatball insignia on the wings of the Vals as they pull out of their dives, their bombs already on the way. At 11:27 a.m., the Yorktown's luck runs out. A single 250-kilogram, semi-armor-piercing bomb finds its mark. It's not a glancing blow. A lookout screams a warning that is swallowed by the chaos. The bomb, released with precision, strikes the flight deck just aft of the No. 2 elevator. It punches through the thick teak and steel as if it were paper. It doesn't explode. Not yet. Deep in the ship, in the compartment for the forward 1.1-inch anti-aircraft gun magazine, a sailor looks up at the sound of tearing metal. The bomb continues its journey. It rips through the hangar deck, narrowly missing fueled and armed aircraft being prepped for launch. It smashes through the second deck, then the third. It finally comes to rest 4 decks down, in an aviation storeroom, before detonating in a colossal, deafening roar. The Yorktown lurches sideways, a wounded beast struck in the heart. A massive column of grey-black smoke erupts from the center of the ship, billowing thousands of feet into the air. Below decks, the world ends. The blast rips through bulkheads, twisting steel supports into modern art. It egrows aviation, gasoline, and the fire is instantaneous. A deep, hungry whoosh as the oxygen is consumed, replaced by a raging inferno. 66 men are killed instantly, or trapped by the flames. In the engine rooms, the lights go out. The ship's internal communication system goes dead. Damage control teams, shrouded in asbestos suits and rescue breathing apparatus, plunge into the smoke-filled darkness. They are guided only by the heat on the bulkheads and the screams of the wounded. Fire on the 4th deck, fire in the hangar. The reports are chaotic. The ship is listing. She's losing speed. For the sailors fighting the blaze, the war has shrunk to the 3 feet in front of them. They are fighting the ship itself. The heat is so intense it blisters paint on the deck above. The smoke is so thick they cannot see the man next to them. For hours, they fight. They counterflood compartments to correct the list. They dump volatile aviation gas overboard. They drag their shipmates from the wreckage. By the time the last Japanese plane vanishes over the horizon, the Yorktown is still afloat. But she is a ruin. A massive, blackened hole gapes in her flight deck. Below decks, she is a charred, twisted labyrinth. She is hemorrhaging fuel oil, leaving a shimmering, miles-long slick on the waves. She is, by any reasonable standard, out of the war. As she turns, agonizingly slow, to begin the long, painful limp back toward Pearl Harbor, the men of the fleet watch her go. They see the gaping wound, the list, the plume of smoke that continues to rise. The word spreads from ship to ship. Yorktown is done. She's a floating wreck, a mission kill. They'll be lucky to get her home at all. She is, for all intents and purposes, sunk. May 27th, 1942, Pearl Harbor, Oahu. The alarm gongs ring out across the naval yard. Ship approaching. A signalman on Ford Island lowers his binoculars, his face pale. He's seen the ghosts of December 7th, the wrecks of the Arizona and Oklahoma, but this is a fresh nightmare. Steaming past the sunken battleship Utah, her flag still flying, comes the USS Yorktown. She doesn't sail into harbor, she haunts it. She moves at a funereal 13 knots, trailing a 10-mile-long ribbon of black fuel oil like a trail of blood. The sweet, tropical air of Hawaii is overpowered by the stench of burnt steel, charred paint, and death, which rolls off the carrier in waves. To the thousands of sailors, marines, and shipyard workers who line the docks, she is a spectre, a massive, 20,000-ton zombie. Her hull is streaked with rust and black scorch marks. A huge, jagged wound the entry point of the Japanese bombies, visible on her flight deck, its edges peeled back like the lid of a tin can. She has a noticeable list to port. The men on the dock are silent. They've heard the fleet's scuttlebutt. They knew the Yorktown was hit in the Coral Sea, but this is a wreck. This ship isn't wounded. It's mortally wounded. The sentiment is whispered, then spoken openly. She's done. They'll be working on her for 6 months. Might as well scrap her. As tugboats nudge the crippled giant toward dry dock number 1, a small group of men waits on the quay. Among them is Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. He is a calm, composed man, but his eyes are fixed on the broken carrier with a frightening intensity. While Yorktown was fighting for her life in the Coral Sea, Nimitz's codebreaker station Hypo had intercepted the Japanese plan. They knew Admiral Yamamoto was coming. They knew the target, a tiny atoll named Midway. And they knew he was bringing 4, possibly 6, heavy carriers. Nimitz has the USS Enterprise and the USS Hornet. It's not enough. He needs Yorktown. The moment the gangplank is down, Nimitz is aboard, his white uniform pristine against the grime and soot. He doesn't tour the bridge. He descends into the guts of the ship. He follows Captain Buckmaster down into the darkness, the air still hot and thick with the smell of the fire that raged only days before. He sees the damage. Twisted steel girders, melted wiring, bulkheads warped by unimaginable heat. He sees the bomb plot, the path of the 250 kg projectile, marked in chalk on charred steel. He climbs back into the sunlight and meets with the yard's chief naval constructor, H.C. Stubb Dillingham, and Captain J.S. Jimmy Gender, the yard's repair superintendent. The initial inspection reports are grim. The list of repairs is staggering. The internal damage is catastrophic. The flight deck needs to be completely replaced. The boilers are shaky. How long? Nimitz asks. The estimators shift on their feet. They are professionals. They know what it takes to rebuild a capital ship. Admiral, one of them says carefully, the damage is extensive. To make her truly combat-ready, we're looking at 90 days, maybe 120. Some estimates ranged as high as 6 months. Nimitz's gaze is unwavering. He looks from the broken ship to the men. He knows the Japanese fleet has already sailed. He knows the fate of the Pacific War may be decided in the next few days. Gentlemen, Nimitz says, his voice quiet but absolute. We don't have 90 days. He turns and points to the carrier. I want this ship back in the fleet in 72 hours. The engineers and constructors are stunned. It's not a request. It's an order. But it's an impossible one. It's madness. 72 hours? They couldn't even clean the soot off in 72 hours. To rebuild a carrier, a city of steel, in 3 days? The yard commanders look at each other. They look at the admiral. They look at the colossal, dead ship filling the dry dock. The order is insane, but it is an order. As Nimitz walks away, the first calls are already going out. The PA system at Pearl Harbor explodes to life, not with an alarm, but with a call to arms. All shipyard workers, all hands, report to Dry Dock 1. All shifts are cancelled. This is not a drill. The miracle has been ordered. Now, it had to be performed. May 27th, 1942, 14:30 hours. The water has not finished draining from Dry Dock number 1 before the first wave of men attacks the ship. It's not a repair, it's an invasion. Over 400 shipyard worker civilians and Navy alike swarm the USS Yorktown. They are welders, ship fitters, electricians, riggers, carpenters, and boiler makers. They are joined by hundreds of the Yorktown's own crew, who refuse to leave their ship. The repair officers had begged for 90 days. They have 72 hours. This is not a job for specialists working in sequence. It is an all-out, simultaneous assault. Floodlights are rigged, blazing down into the dry dock, turning the Hawaiian night into a blinding, shadow-filled artificial day. The yard becomes a symphony of industrial-scale pandemonium. The shriek of cutting torches ripping through steel, the rat-tat-tat of rivet guns, the hiss and crack of hundreds of arc welders, and the constant, deafening clang of sledgehammers on metal plates create a roar that can be heard across Pearl Harbor. There is no time for proper procedure. There is no time for by the book. Deep in the ship's guts, damage control teams and ship fitters work in the charred, flooded compartments that were a death trap just days before. The heat is still radiating from the bulkheads. They don't bother unbolting ruined sections. They cut them out with torches, letting the molten hot steel fall into the darkness. They don't have time to re-rivet the new support beams. Instead, they weld them directly to the hull. It's a fast, ugly, brutal solution, but it's strong. Electricians work in chest-deep, oily water, bypassing entire switchboards that have been melted into slag. They run new, heavy-gauge cables directly from the generators, hanging them from the ceilings like thick jungle vines, just to get power to the steering gear and the guns. But the real challenge is the flight deck. The gaping, 20-foot hole is an offense to the sky. A carrier without a flight deck is just a target. They cannot replace the entire section. That alone would take weeks. So, they improvise. A team of riggers and welders cuts a massive, neat rectangle around the entire blast-damaged area. The ruined metal is hoisted out by a dockside crane. Then, a new, prefabricated steel patch is lowered into its place. There's no time to order teak or Douglas fir from the mainland. Instead, yard workers scavenge. They find a stockpile of wood planks intended to build a new sidewalk for the base. Carpenters swarm the patch, sawing, fitting, and hammering the planks into place over the steel. It's not a carrier flight deck, it's a parking lot. To level it out, they pour a new, fast-drying concrete compound, troweling it smooth as the carpenters nail down the final boards. For 3 days and 3 nights, no one sleeps. Men work 24-hour shifts, then 36-hour shifts, collapsing on piles of rope or in the shade of a warehouse for 40 minutes before getting back up. Volunteers, including local women, run canteens, handing out sandwiches and pouring thousands of gallons of scalding hot coffee, passing it directly to the welders on their scaffolds. The sailors of the Enterprise and Hornet berthed nearby. Watch this happen with a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had seen the Yorktown limp in. They knew what a mission kill looked like. What they are seeing now is not a repair, it is a resurrection. At 9 on the morning of May 29th, the dock is reflooded. The Yorktown floats, her list gone. The hole in her deck is gone, replaced by an ugly, unmistakable patch. She is still scarred, still blackened. Her paint is a mismatched checkerboard of primer grey and fresh blue. But she is whole. She has moved from the dry dock to a fueling pier. As thousands of tons of fuel oil and aviation gas are pumped back into her, a new air group flies overhead the veteran survivors of Scouting Squadron 3 and Bombing Squadron 3, their own carrier, the Lexington, lost at the Coral Sea. They land on the patched-up deck, their planes armed and ready. At 9 on May 30th, just 72 hours after her impossible repair order was given, Captain Buckmaster gives the command. All engines ahead 1/3. The USS Yorktown steams out of Pearl Harbor, past the silent, watching ships. The sailors on those other decks, the ones who saw her arrive, cannot believe their eyes. The ghost ship, the wreck, the sunk carrier, is alive, and she is heading for war, June 2nd, 1942, the North Pacific. The designated rendezvous point is a patch of empty ocean, known only by its code name, Point Luck. It is 325 miles northeast of Midway Atoll, a place where no one should be. Aboard the carriers USS Enterprise and USS Hornet, the men of Task Force 16 are tense. They have been at sea for days, sailing from Pearl under a cloak of secrecy. They are the tip of America's spear, and they feel desperately alone. They know what's coming. They know the Japanese are bearing down on Midway with an enormous fleet, a fleet that includes the 4 veteran carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. The scuttlebutt on the hangar decks is grim. It's 2 against 4. Where's the rest of the fleet? They know the Saratoga is still under repair. They know the Lexington is at the bottom of the Coral Sea. And they know the Yorktown is gone. They'd heard the reports. The fleet's grapevine, the pipe, was faster than any official communique. Yorktown was a floating wreck. She'd been hit by a 550-pounder. She'd been hammered. She was out of the war, sitting in dry dock at Pearl, where she'd be for the next 3 months, minimum. The men of TF-16 have resigned themselves to a desperate, uneven fight. In the pre-dawn gloom, a lookout on the Enterprise bridge, high above the pitching deck, raises his binoculars. Smoke on the horizon, bearing southeast. Admiral Raymond Spruance snaps to attention. This is it. Japanese or American? He has been waiting for Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, his senior. But Fletcher was supposed to be in command of the Yorktown task force, and the Yorktown was sunk. A signalman begins flashing a recognition code into the darkness. On the Yorktown, the voyage has been a race against time. She is not a well ship. She is a barely functional invalid, pushed back into the fight. Below decks, the air is still thick with the smell of charred insulation and damp concrete. Welders are still working as she sails, reinforcing the patchwork done in the yard. Her radar is jury-rigged. She can only make 27 knots, max. Her crew, the same men who fought the fires and limped her home, are exhausted. They haven't slept in what feels like a month. But they are here. As the sun's first rays break the horizon, the Yorktown answers the signal lamp. The effect on the fleet is electric. On the flight decks of the Enterprise and Hornet, thousands of men pilots, gunners, deckhands stop what they are doing. They stare. It's not a cruiser. It's not a destroyer. It's a York-class carrier. Binoculars are passed from man to man. The whispers are frantic. It can't be. My God, is that? It's the Yorktown. It's the Yorktown. They can see the mismatched paint. They can see the ugly, fresh patch on her flight deck, a pale rectangle that screams of hurried, desperate work. This is not the pristine carrier they remembered. This is a brawler, scarred and beaten, who has staggered back to her feet for one more round. To the men of Task Force 16, it is a miracle. It's as if a ship has risen from the dead. The impossible has happened. The sunk ship has rejoined the fleet. A surge of adrenaline, of raw, unadulterated hope, rips through the American ships. They are no longer 2 carriers against 4. They are 3. The odds are still long, but they are no longer impossible. Admiral Fletcher, from Yorktown's bridge, signals his flagship status to Spruance. The 3 carriers, the Hornet, the Enterprise, and the Yorktown the Ghost, the Big E, and the Hornet form a single, powerful task force. They turn their bows northwest. They are a united force, sailing together toward the Japanese armada. The shock, the disbelief, and the sudden, fierce morale boost are a palpable thing. The sailors look at the Yorktown, a testament to the impossible work of the men at Pearl Harbor. She is the proof that America is in this fight to the end. And she is sailing straight into the sights of the one man who believed her dead, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commander of the Japanese First Air Fleet, June 4th, 1942, 7 hours. Northeast of Midway, the Yorktown's flight deck, a patchwork of new pine, concrete, and steel, is alive with roaring engines. The men of Bombing Squadron, 3VB3, and Scouting Squadron 3VS3, are in their cockpits. These are the Lexington's men, orphans, who lost their own carrier at the Coral Sea. Now, they fly from the deck of a ship its crew calls the Ghost. The first waves of American planes from Hornet and Enterprise have already launched. The torpedo bombers of Torpedo Squadron 8, with their agonizingly slow TBD Devastator planes, have flown into a buzzsaw of Japanese Zero fighters and anti-aircraft fire. They are being annihilated. On the Yorktown's bridge, Admiral Fletcher and Captain Buckmaster receive the grim reports. One after another, the American attacks are failing. The Japanese carrier fleet, the Kido Butai, untouched, its combat air patrol shredding the American attackers. The Yorktown's own torpedo squadron, VT-3, led by Lieutenant Commander Lance Lem Massey, is also in the air. Fletcher, unlike the other commanders, has launched his bombers and torpedo planes as a coordinated strike, but they still can't find the Japanese. By 10 a.m., the battle looks lost. The American torpedo squadrons are a memory. The Zeros, having butchered the low-flying Torpeckers, are low on fuel and ammunition. They are returning to their carriers to rearm. At 10:20 a.m., high above the chaos, Lieutenant Commander C. Wade McCluskey of the Enterprise Air Group, flying on fumes, spots a lone Japanese destroyer and follows it. At the same moment, the Yorktown's Air Group, led by Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie of VB-3, arrives from a different direction. Below them, the Japanese fleet is in its most vulnerable state. The decks of Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu are a scene of frantic, ordered chaos. They are rearming their planes, not for another strike on Midway, but for a strike on the American carriers, which they have just discovered. Their decks are crowded with aircraft. Fuel hoses are snaked across the steel. Bombs and torpedoes are stacked, ready to be loaded. At 10:22 a.m., Wade McCluskey's Enterprise bombers begin their dive on the Kaga. At 10:24 a.m., Max Leslie, leading the Yorktown's VB-3, spots the carrier Soryu far below. He radios his men, "Attack! Attack!" He rolls his SBD Dauntless dive bomber over, pointing its nose straight at the sea. The world narrows to the circular gun sight. The shriek of the wind over the wings becomes a deafening 9,000-foot scream. He is plunging at 250 knots, a man-guided missile. The Japanese on the Soryu deck look up in pure, undiluted terror. Their Zeros are at sea level, their guns are pointed the wrong way. The sky is raining American bombs. Leslie's 1,000-pound bomb is the first to hit. It smashes into the Soryu's flight deck, just forward of the island, plunging into the hangar deck below, which is packed with fueled planes. The explosion is catastrophic. It detonates the planes, the fuel, and the other bombs, tearing the ship apart from the inside. 2 more Yorktown bombs follow, ripping the Soryu open. Within seconds, the Japanese carrier is no longer a warship. It is a 600-foot-long column of flame. Simultaneously, the Enterprise bombers are doing the same to Akagi and Kaga. In less than 5 minutes, the sunk ship, the Yorktown, the ship that was a smouldering wreck in Pearl Harbor just 1 week ago, has, along with its sister Enterprise, changed the course of the entire war. The men who patched her together with scrap wood, concrete, and sheer willpower have delivered a mortal blow to the Japanese Empire. The smoke from the 3 burning Japanese carriers climbs 20,000 feet into the sky. It is a funeral pyre for the Kido Butai. But one Japanese carrier remains, the Hiryu. And its commander, Admiral Taemon Yamaguchi, is furious. He has seen the American bombers. He has tracked their flight path. And he knows exactly where they came from. He points to his surviving aircraft. He points to the Yorktown, June 4th, 1942, 11:50 hours. Aboard the Yorktown, the celebration is short-lived. The victorious SBD, Dauntless dive bombers are circling, their fuel gauges near empty, their pilots desperate to land on the patched-up deck. The ship's crew is a whirlwind of activity, rearming, refueling, and clearing the deck. They are a well-oiled machine, veterans of the Coral Sea's chaos. Then, the radar operator's voice cuts through the tactical channel, his tone tight with adrenaline. "Bogies! Vector 285, 33 miles. Many bogies." It is Admiral Yamaguchi's revenge. The last surviving Japanese carrier, Hiryu, has launched its counterstrike. 18D3. Naval dive bombers escorted by 6 Zero fighters are inbound, following the Yorktown's returning planes home. "All hands, man your battle stations." Captain Buckmaster's order echoes from the ship's loudspeakers. Stand by to repel air attack. The Yorktown's own combat air patrol, a handful of F-4F Wildcats, climb to intercept. The sky becomes a canvas of dogfights, but the Vals are focused. They are veterans. They will not be deterred. The men at the 5-inch and 1.1-inch anti-aircraft guns tilt their weapons to the sky. They see the black specks detach from the clouds, growing larger with horrifying speed. Here they come! The Yorktown lurches, hard right rudder, her freshly repaired engines straining as she tries to comb the attack. The air rips apart. The thump-thump-thump of the 1.1-inch guns is drowned out by the shriek of diving planes and the roar of the 5-inch batteries. At 12 p.m., the first bomb hits. It's a 250 kg projectile that strikes the port side of the flight deck, just aft of the bridge. It explodes on contact, ripping through the 1.1-inch gun mount below, killing or wounding every man in the crew. Seconds later, a second bomb, perfectly aimed by Lieutenant Michio Kobayashi, finds a 1 in a million mark. It plunges directly down the ship's massive smokestack, the funnel. It smashes through the uptakes, 4 decks down, before detonating in the heart of the ship's boilers. The Yorktown dies. The explosion is a mortal blow. It snuffs out the fires in 5 of her 6 boilers. The massive engines go silent. The lights go out. The water pressure to the fire hoses vanishes. All steam, all power, all motion is gone. The ship lurches to a halt, dead in the water. A massive, helpless target. A third bomb strikes, piercing the flight deck and exploding in the forward aviation storeroom, the exact same compartment hit in the Coral Sea. It ignites a fire that rages near the aviation gas tanks. To the Japanese pilots pulling up, their mission is a success. They see a burning, motionless, smoking wreck. They radio back to the Hiryu. Carrier has been sunk, but they have sunk a ship whose crew does not know how to quit. In the black, suffocating darkness of the boiler rooms, Chief Water Tender Oscar B. Scott and his men are surrounded by 600-degree steam. They hear the order to evacuate the space, but Scott refuses. He knows if they leave, the ship is finished. Working by feel, in blistering heat, they begin the impossible task of relighting the boilers. On deck, the damage control teams, led by the indomitable Lieutenant Commander Joe Clifton, are not panicking. This is not their first fire. They attack the blaze in the storeroom. They begin patching the flight deck again. For an hour, the Yorktown is a floating inferno, a scene of disciplined, desperate heroism. Then, at 15 p.m., a miracle. Deep in the ship, Scott's men get 1 boiler lit, then a second, then a third. The ship shudders. A wisp of steam comes from her pipes. At 13:40 p.m., the engine room telegraph clangs. All engines ahead 1/3. The Yorktown begins to move. 15 knots, 18 knots. By 14:20 p.m., she is making 20 knots. Her deck fires are out, and her crew is refueling her fighter patrol. She is so alive that when the Hiryu's second strike force this time, B-5N Kate torpedo bombers arrives, their commander radios in confusion. The first wave said the carrier was sunk, but the ship below him is steaming, maneuvering, and fighting. He banks his plane to attack the undamaged American carrier. June 4th, 1942, 14:26 hours. The 10 B-5N Kate torpedo bombers from the Hiryu, led by the veteran Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga, split into 2 groups. It's a classic anvil and hammer attack, designed to catch a maneuvering ship from both sides, ensuring a kill. On the Yorktown's bridge, Captain Buckmaster sees the attack developing. "Hard right rudder!" he roars, trying to turn the ship's stern toward the attackers. But the Yorktown is not the ship she was. Her patched-up boilers and damaged steering gear make her sluggish, slow to respond. She is still bleeding, and the sharks are here. The Kates come in low, so low, their propellers are churning the whitecaps. This is a suicide run for many of them. The Yorktown's remaining gunners, those who survived the dive-bombing attack, throw up a wall of desperate, frantic fire. Tracers fill the air. Men on the 1.1-inch guns fire until the barrels melt, screaming at the incoming planes. They hit Tomonaga's plane. It bursts into flame, but he doesn't waver. He continues his run, a flying coffin, determined to get his torpedo in the water before he dies. Torpedoes in the water! Port side! Torpedoes in the water! Starboard side! The lookouts call it out at the same time. The trap is sprung. There is nowhere for Buckmaster to turn. He has been outmaneuvered by a ship that is not fully alive. At 14:40 p.m., the first torpedo hits. It strikes the port side, amidships. The 450-pound warhead detonates with a colossal, hollow boom that lifts the 20,000-ton carrier in the water. It feels like the ship has been kicked by a giant. Seconds later, the second torpedo hits. It strikes just aft of the first, in the same vulnerable port side. The explosion is devastating. It rips a 60-foot gash in her hull. It shatters the internal bulkheads, including the ones so hastily repaired at Pearl Harbor. The sea, which the men at Dry Dock 1 fought so hard to keep out, rushes in. The Yorktown shudders to a stop as if she's hit a mountain. The lights go out, this time for good. The effect is immediate and catastrophic. The ship, already damaged, has no reserve buoyancy. She takes on a massive, sickening list to port. 10 degrees, 15 degrees. Water pours into her engineering spaces. On the flight deck, men are thrown from their feet. A plane that has just landed, an F-4F Wildcat, begins to slide on the tilting deck, its landing gear screeching on the patched wood and concrete. It slides over the port edge and vanishes into the ocean. All engines stop. Buckmaster orders, but it's useless. The engine rooms are already flooding. The ship is dying. The list increases. 20 degrees. 26 degrees. It is impossible to stand. Men grab onto railings, guns, and lifelines. Below decks, it's a dark, vertical nightmare. Wounded men are being drowned where they lie. The ship is going to capsize. Captain Buckmaster, his face a mask of grim duty, sees it. His ship, the ship that came back from the deadies now, finally, lost. He has done everything. His crew has done everything. The shipyard workers in Pearl Harbor had given them a chance, and they had used that chance to break the back of the Japanese fleet. But the price has come due. At 14:55 p.m., with the port flight deck rail dipping into the ocean waves, Captain Buckmaster gives the one order he thought he would never have to give. All hands, abandon ship. The order spreads. Men, exhausted, burned, and wounded, begin the orderly, terrible process of leaving their home. They lower the wounded on lines. They inflate rafts. They jump, one by one, from the high, starboard side into the oily, debris-strewn water. They leave a ship that refuses to die quickly. As the men paddle away, they look back. The Ghost is still there, lying on her side like a wounded whale, her ensign still flying. They are in disbelief. The ship they brought back, the ship that had just rejoined the fleet, was now a wreck. But as they watch, a new sound fills the air. High above, American SBD's planes from Enterprise and Yorktown, her Zephyr flying past them, heading northwest. They are heading for the Hiryu. The Yorktown has soaked up the last of the Japanese fury. She has bought the American fleet the time it needed to find and kill the fourth and final Japanese carrier. Her sacrifice was not the end of the battle, it was the key to winning it. June 5th, 1942. The waters near Midway. Dawn breaks over a grey, empty sea. The battle is over. The Hiryu, the last of Nagumo's great carriers, is a burning hulk on the horizon, scuttled by her own crew after the Enterprise's bomber sacking on a sighting report from a Yorktown scout plane found her and tore her apart. The Kido Butai is officially annihilated. The victory is total. But the Yorktown is still here. She has defied the Japanese, defied the odds, and now she is defying the ocean. She is still floating, a massive, crippled hulk, listing at 26 degrees but stubbornly refusing to sink. Captain Buckmaster, rescued and now on the bridge of the cruiser Astoria, cannot take his eyes off his ship. She shouldn't be here. By every law of naval warfare, she should be at the bottom. But the miracle work of Pearl Harbor, the counter-flooding, the sheer toughness of her design, is holding her up. A new, audacious, almost insane idea begins to form. "Get me a salvage party," Buckmaster orders. "If she won't sink, then by God, they will save her." A call is put out. 170 men, officers and enlisted, from the Yorktown's own crew, volunteer. They are led by Captain Buckmaster and the damage control wizard, Joe Clifton. They are transferred to the destroyer USS Hammond, which cautiously approaches the sleeping giant. Getting aboard is a feat in itself. The Hammond noses up to the Yorktown's listing starboard side. The volunteers, carrying pumps, tools, and medical supplies, have to jump from the destroyer up to the flight deck of the carrier, which hangs over them. They land on the deck, a surface tilted like a steep hill. It's a ghost ship. The only sound is the groaning of stressed metal and the slap of waves against the wounded hull. The salvage party gets to work. This is more desperate than Pearl Harbor. They begin cutting loose everything on the port side to save weight, 5-inch guns, spare parts, anything to stop the list. They run heavy cables from the Hammond to the Yorktown. The USS Hammond DD 412, a small 1,500-ton destroyer, lays herself alongside the massive carrier, lashing herself to the wounded beast like a tiny nurse. The Hammond provides power for the Yorktown's pumps and water for the fire hoses. A team of men led by Lieutenant Clifton descends back into the dark, flooded guts of the ship. The same men who fought the fires, now fighting the ocean itself. They begin to counterflood the starboard compartments. They are pumping water into the good side of the ship, a terrible gamble to try and right her. And it begins to work. By the afternoon of June 6th, the list has been reduced by 2 degrees. It's a small change, but it's a victory. The Yorktown is responding. The tugboat USS Vireo arrives and puts a tow line on her. The ship is agonizingly, impossibly, beginning to move. A cheer goes up from the men on the Hammond and the salvage party on the Yorktown. They are going to do it. They are going to sail this ghost home. They're going to tow this 20,000-ton miracle all the way back to Pearl Harbor. The men at the shipyard will be able to see, with their own eyes, what their 3 days of impossible work had accomplished. The men are exhausted, but they are jubilant. They have beaten the Japanese. They have beaten the sea. They are so focused on their work, on the pumps, on the tow lines, that no one notices the 4 thin, silver wakes approaching from the starboard side. June 6th, 1942. 13:30 hours. The jubilation of the salvage party is a tangible thing. They can feel the ship responding. The 2-degree shift in the list is a victory snatched from the jaws of the ocean. The men on the USS Hammond, lashed to the carrier's side, are running their generators at full, pouring lifeblood into the wounded giant. On the Yorktown's sloping deck, men are eating K-rations, their first meal in 24 hours. For the first time, it feels like the ghost might actually make it home. They are being watched. 14 miles away, the eye of a periscope breaks the waves. It is the Japanese submarine I-168. This is no chance encounter. After the Hiryu was sunk, Admiral Yamamoto himself had ordered I-168 to find the damaged American carrier, one his pilots had sunk twice and finished the job. For hours, her commander, Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanabe, has been stalking his prey. He has slipped inside the American destroyer screen, a masterful feat of silent running. Through his periscope, he sees a sight that must have boggled his mind. The carrier, on her side, still afloat. And, lashed to her, a bonus, a destroyer, perfectly still, right next to his primary target. He has 2 warships for the price of 1. Stand-by torpedoes, fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, fire 4. In the sonar room of the Hammond, the sonarman is listening for enemy submarines, but his own ship's generators and the pumps on Yorktown are making a racket. Still, he hears it. The high-pitched, deadly ping-ping-ping of high-speed propellers. Torpedoes! Torpedoes in the water! Starboard beam! On the Yorktown's deck, a lookout sees them. 4 thin silver wakes, porpoising through the waves, moving with terrifying speed. Torpedoes! Aboard the Hamman, there is no time. There is no time to think, no time to cut the lines, no time to sound general quarters. The men are trapped, tied to a 20,000-ton wall. The ship's 20mm gunners, in a hopeless act of defiance, open fire, their tracers stitching the water, trying to detonate the warheads. It's useless. The torpedoes are Type 95 seconds, long lances. They are fast, and they carry a massive 1,000-pound warhead. At 13:35 p.m., the first torpedo in the spread passes just astern of the Hamman. The second torpedo strikes the Hamman directly amidships. The destroyer does not explode, it disintegrates. The Hamman is a 1,500-ton ship. The Yorktown, absorbing the blow, is 20,000 tons. The torpedo, striking the smaller ship, is catastrophic. It breaks the Hamman's keel. The bow and stern of the small destroyer fold upwards, like a wallet closing. The blast wave is so powerful it hurls men from the Yorktown's flight deck 100 feet away. Then, the other two torpedoes, their paths perfectly calculated, pass under the broken wreck of the Hamman and strike the Yorktown. Two more massive hollow booms that tear into the carrier's good starboard side. The very compartments that the salvage team was using to right the ship are now blown wide open. The sea, which they had been fighting with pumps and prayers, comes in not as a leak, but as a flood. The Yorktown, with a great, metallic, agonizing groan, shudders. The 2-degree correction is instantly erased. The ship lurches back to port, the list returning with a vengeance. She is no longer being saved, she is being executed. The Hamman is gone. From the moment of impact to the moment her mast slips under the waves, it takes less than 4 minutes. But the horror is not over. As the Hamman's wreck sinks, it plunges past the 100-foot mark. The destroyer's own depth charges, armed and set to explode at depth to kill submarines, are still on her racks. A half-dozen of them go off. 2 massive, underwater concussions erupt, a thump so powerful it is felt in the hulls of ships miles away. For the men in the water, the survivors of the Hamman and the Yorktown salvage party members blown off the deck, it is a death sentence. The hydraulic shockwave hits them like a solid object. It kills 80 men, many of them in their life jackets. Aboard the Yorktown, the remaining salvage party is stunned. Their support ship is gone, their comrades are dead. And their ship, the ship they loved, is dying beneath their feet. The deck is tilting, steeper and steeper. For the second time in 2 days, Captain Buckmaster, his face etched with a grief and exhaustion that no man should ever know, looks at his dying ship. The miracle is over. He gives the order, abandon ship. June 7th, 1942, 4:58 a.m. The night is dark. The destroyer, USS Hughes, one of the escorts, circles the scene, its sonar pinging frantically, hunting for the I-168. The crew of the Hughes is helpless, forced to watch the final act of a tragedy. The Yorktown is still there. She has been dying for over 14 hours since the torpedoes hit. All through the night, the survivors of the salvage party and the Hamman, picked up by the other destroyers, have watched their ship refuse to sink. She is a dark, mountainous silhouette against the stars, her list now a grotesque 35 degrees. The men who watch are silent. They are the same sailors who, just a week ago, stood on the docks at Pearl Harbor and watched this same ship, a smoking ruin, arrive home. They are the men who saw the 1,400 shipyard workers swarm her, who saw the wood and concrete go onto her deck. They are the ones who watched, in disbelief, as she steamed back out of the harbor in just 3 days. They had called her a ghost, they had called her a miracle, and they had followed her into the greatest naval battle in their nation's history. Now, the miracle is ending. As the first grey light of dawn streaks the eastern sky, a new sound comes from the Yorktown. It is not an explosion, it is a long, shuddering, metallic groan, a sound of a giant surrendering. The men on the Hughes watch in silence. The Yorktown's list, which has held steady for hours, begins to increase rapidly. 35 degrees becomes 40. 40 becomes 50. Her flight deck, that patched up, concrete and pine runway that launched the planes that killed the Soryu is now a vertical wall. She begins to capsize. Slowly, with a strange, solemn grace, the massive red-painted bottom of her hull rolls up toward the sky. Her 3 giant bronze propellers lift out of the water, catching the first light of the sun. The men on the Hughes can see the gaping, black torpedo wounds that the I-168 inflicted. She hangs there for a moment, bottom up, as if taking one last look at the sky. Her battle flag, the stars and stripes, is still attached to its mast, now pointing straight down into the depths. Then, she begins to go. The Yorktown does not plunge. She slides. Stern first, she slips back into the Pacific. The water closes over her rudders, her propellers, her stern. There is no panic, just a final, inexorable slide. As her bow, the last part of her to see the sky, points vertically, her remaining air escapes in a final, great sigh. At 5:01 a.m., June 7th, 1942, the USS Yorktown, CV-5, is gone. Where a 20,000-ton aircraft carrier had been, there is now only a widening circle of foam, oil, and debris. Her escorts circle the spot, dropping a few token depth charges, not for revenge, but as a final, angry salute. The sailors who saw it never forgot. The ship was sunk at the Coral Sea. The shipyard workers at Pearl Harbor, in a 72-hour frenzy of welding, hammering, and sheer willpower, had performed an impossible resurrection. They had sent a ghost back to war, and that ghost, in the 3 days of life bought for her by those workers, had changed the world. She had fought, she had died, she had been revived, and she had fought again. She absorbed the death blows of 2 Japanese air wings and a submarine, and in doing so, she had saved the Enterprise and Hornet. She had traded her own life, a life that should have ended a month earlier, for 3 of the Emperor's finest carriers. To the American sailors who saw her limp into Pearl Harbor, a wreck, and then watched her sail back out, ready for a fight, it was the moment they knew the impossible was now the standard. And a war that had seemed lost was now a war they were going to win.